Hey there, Buy Around listeners. I just want to say a huge thank you for all your support throughout the year. It's been quite the journey so far. We're going to take a little break over the next couple of weeks, but we'll be back in January, bigger and better, ready to kick off season 2023. So make sure you stay tuned and get ready for that. It's going to be a cracking year, bigger and better than what we've managed to achieve so far. But thank you so much for all the support throughout the year. Please enjoy this next interview. This is with new Manly coach Anthony Seibold. This promises to be an outstanding chat, so I hope you enjoy it as much as I enjoyed making it. Though, thank you once again. Buy Around listeners, have a great Christmas, a happy new year, all the very best, and thank you so much again. Siebes, it's been quite a couple of months for you. First off, how are you?
Yeah, no, it's been a busy time, Jimmy, but no, I'm good, mate. I'm excited to be back home. Really optimistic about the opportunity we have at Manly, and really humbled to be back in the game as a head coach.
Yeah, it is a great opportunity. I guess most of the time when a new coach comes into an organisation, you got to look at results, performance, how you play. That would be the main area of focus. From the outside looking in, it appears that you're in a bit of a different or very rare situation where you've got to deal with an apparent fracture within the group. So how have you gone about that so far?
Yeah, Jimmy, and you'd understand this, mate. Often what the perception is on the outside isn't reality on the inside. There's obviously some challenges at the back end of last year, but one of the things that we try to do is almost like start with a clean sheet of paper, so to speak. And I think the big things for the coaching staff and the playing group has been built around how we want to train. How does a Manly player train? What's expected in that space? Obviously, there's a tactical, technical side of things. Working really close with some of the leaders there. But the big thing for me is the togetherness and the belonging. I think every group or every individual wants to be part of a group. They want to belong. And so we've been doing some stuff in that space to continue to bring that belonging to the group in the first block of training. So a lot of stuff we're doing away from footy, mate. And we're working really hard to do everything together. So it's been an interesting start. It's been really positive start. And we've got plenty of work to do as well.
I know, so you've got some of the group have been away on World Cup, but have you had the group all in together to sort of hash out their differences? Well,
one of the things I believe in, mate, it's okay to disagree. Like, not everyone's going to agree, whether it's from a football point of view, outside football point of view. Everyone will disagree. But the thing that I think is really important is that you commit. So it's okay to disagree. It's okay to have a difference of opinion. But whatever the group or the head coach as the leader of the group decides we need to commit to, and that's the reality of every group I've worked in. I think we get a really good opportunity to have the whole group in, including the World Cup players, on a 3-day camp before the Christmas break. And I thought that was really important, that all the group come in together before we go away and spend some time on a break with their families and friends, and we'll do that. And I think it says a lot about where the group wants to go, that everyone's all in for that. And I think that's a really positive opportunity for us to be a bit uncomfortable at a camp, but also get together and work as a team.
So will that be the sort of traditional dreaded pre-season army style camp, or is it more about just getting the group away?
Well, there's a balance there, isn't there? I think, if you said to me, what's the objective of the camp? I think you need to have really clear objectives. Like, just any one of us can go and take a group and make them fatigued and make them tired and that type of thing. So that's not a competitive advantage. The competitive advantage we're trying to get out of this camp is, obviously to make the group uncomfortable, but see how they work in smaller groups, see how they work in a larger group. I think storytelling is really important, so there's opportunities for that. And I think the thing that I've probably learnt from positive and negative experiences, that sharing your story is a really important part of connecting groups together, and even showing some vulnerability. Even in my case, sharing some of my story of failures or difficult times, I think is really important. So that's the idea of the camp. Uncomfortable, get the guys working in groups, but also sharing our story. So that brings that sort of belonging and togetherness as the focal point.
Yeah, I think that is important to have that time away and use the art of conversation, and can help bring that group together. And you spoke just before about what happens externally versus what's actually happened internally. I'm just sort of projecting Manly's season ahead, and the stories are going to keep coming back, and people are going to keep reverting to it. It was low hanging fruit last year for all the media for Manly. It was just they lost. Let's not look at performance. Let's just look at what happened with the Pride jersey situation. How do you stop the outside noise? Is it just pure and simply just results? You get results, and that'll stop it.
Yeah, I think so, Jimmy. The reality of it is it will continue to be a discussion piece in the media, potentially, in the wider community. And I think one way that you sort of dilute that noise is by performance and, winning games. But even when you lose games, Jimmy, there's a difference between being outplayed and having a red-hot crack and improving. And sometimes people don't see that. They just see the scoreboard, which is understandable. But internally, when you're improving and when you have a red-hot crack. So I just think it's by performance. I think performance will quieten that noise. And if we don't perform, then you probably expect that to be around. One thing that I have noticed, though, that internally there's a group that's working really hard, as you'd expect this time of year, but there's a real sense of optimism around the group. They feel like it was a missed opportunity the back end of last year. And, my job as the head coach is to, give the guys a framework to, build on the good things they did, because there were some good things they did last year and certainly in 2021. We've got to try and build on that. So that's our challenge. But yeah, you're right. The noise will be there if we're not winning games.
I promise this is the last question on that, because just looking at it, whichever way the wind blows, there's going to be some seed. So if Manly decide to run with the jersey again, there's going to be some headlines, positive and negative. And if they don't, there's also going to be backlash from certain areas of society as well. Are you happy with the situation, the position that the club has taken?
Yeah, so the position the club's taken, and Tony Mesrov spoke to this point publicly, so it's not something that hasn't been discussed, is the NRL are going to take a lead on essentially around that includes all. Now, what that looks like, I'm not too sure, but the NRL, from our understanding, is they're going to consult the RLPA. So if there is a round to celebrate inclusivity, whether it's separate to the Women and League round or how that's shaped up, I'm not 100% sure, but that'll be led by the NRL rather than Manly. So I think that takes the pressure off the club in so many respects. But not only that, and I think more importantly, mate, it takes the pressure off the players and putting them in a really awkward or difficult situation where they have to make some decisions. So, I think it's a good thing that the NRL take a lead on those types of rounds and they'll consult the appropriate parties, which I think is the right thing to do.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you on that one. This should be a game approach, and clubs can have their initiatives and look to support areas of society or charitable organisations. But I think this is probably something for the NRL. I think it's a looking at it from a football perspective, which that's your area of focus, right? I think that's the smart approach. I really do. I heard in an interview you did recently, you spoke about the character of the Trbojevic Brothers. what do you like about them, and why are they so important to the organisation as a whole? Not just the what we see on the field, but the whole organisation. What stands out about those two?
Well, a couple of things stand out, but the first one that comes to mind is their standing in the community. Being locals who went to school in the area, grew up in the area, they played all their junior rugby league in the area. There's been so many stories about them going back to their local club, and working the canteen and running water and all sorts of stuff like that. So that's the first thing. They're very much part of the fabric of the Manly community, which I just love. I love the fact that those, that family is so well ingrained and so well respected in the community. Second to that, having worked with those guys before, I worked with them as an assistant coach a few years ago, and they're both quite young, but they both wanted to learn and they wanted to get better. And I saw that on the training paddock. I saw that with regards to, their hunger for learning about the game and so on. So I knew that, I knew that part of their personality or their character. And the third one is that they produce on the field. So they're very consistent. For me, the best players in the games are those ones who, whose difference in their performance is very narrow. So their best and their worst, is not too far away. And I reckon you get that from Tom and Jake. So, there's three really big things, but they're so passionate about the club. And I get that most players are passionate about the club, in regards to, at different clubs. But they've just got a real good understanding of the Manly DNA. And the Manly DNA is different to another club's DNA. And they really value that and they drive that. So, they're special young men, and their younger brother Ben is making his way in the game as well. But, they're integral to, any, improvement in our team, and any sort of, I suppose, wins and joys that we get down the track. They'll be integral to that.
Yeah, obviously Tom is the superstar, but I just love how, you can just see Jake cares.
Cares, yeah.
After a loss, he's devastated. Looks like he's had, his heart ripped out of his chest. Yeah. He looks defeated.
And that's, and in some ways, in the modern game, that's unique, isn't it? Mm. It shouldn't be, in my opinion, but that's quite unique. You can see the pain when they lose, having coached him previously, but also just, this year, one of the things that I think has really helped me see the game in a different in a different way is, doing some media work. I was doing some commentary for SEN during the year and a little bit of work for Channel 9. And just, looking at the game from I suppose a supporters or a fan's perspective, you just see the care when they lose, and he's not spinning the dumb or anything, but you know what it's like, Jimmy, and, watching yourself play and coaching against you, it's probably not dissimilar to the way in my head I pictured, you after games, when I watched on telly or watched your live. Well, he's disappointed because he cares, because you know how much hard work goes into that game during the week. People wouldn't understand, our supporters wouldn't understand how much preparation goes into a week, whether it's a coaching staff or a player. There is a lot of your week invested into that 80 minutes. And you want it to be the best 80 minutes of the week. Sometimes, for whatever reason, mate, it's not. But he cares about it. And we often see other players who can move on pretty quickly. And, that's just potentially society today. But he cares. And that's probably what we love about him as a player.
I think it's that fine balance, isn't it? You speak to some psychologists and they're like, is it, leave your divots behind? We move on and it's on to the next. But I don't know. I think when the results don't happen, leave your divots if you make a mistake, you make an error. But if you've lost the game, I know that, that next day going out with the family, it'd be like,
it's not as good as that.
Can we not go for breakfast? Yeah. It's but you promised the kids, and you're like, but I almost don't want to face the music.
Yeah, no, I get what you're saying, because that happens as a coach too. After a loss, it's the next 24, 48 hours, you're probably not, you're not great with the family stuff. But I do agree with what you're saying. I think in a game, you do need to let your divots go or move on to your next job, because if you dwell for too long, and the player that always come to mind was James Maloney. You know, they used to, like, it was almost like a goldfish mentality, like he couldn't remember what he did if he you know, had a poor pass. Yeah. And that's a trait. Billy Slater was like that. Like Billy, if he made an error, he would not be dwelling on the error, and that's what made him elite, I thought. Often players get in their own heads and they just think about, you know, what's the commentator saying about me? What's the coach going to say to me at halftime or after the game? You need to move on. But I think after a game, like, that's the end of your week. The best time, if you ask players, and you remember this, I'm sure, but most of the players ask, what's the best thing about footy? And the majority of them say, singing the team song in the change room, that first half hour, having a beer with their mates. That's, you work all week. That's the end of your working week. And, you know, it's either a good week or it's a poor week, depending on the scoreboard. So when you get that win, you've got to enjoy that next half hour. And if you lose, I think it's okay to be disappointed because you've invested so much time.
You spoke there about some of those great players that had that ability to just almost forget or not let it affect what they were going to do next in a negative way. That, you know, if you throw a bad pass, you don't go into your shell, you just revert back to type. Is that something that you're going to look to work on with these Manly players? And is that going to come from you, or will you get a psychologist, yeah, or that level of person to come in and start to deliver those messages?
Yeah, so ultimately it comes from the head coach, you know, with regards to how we deal with that. But I am going to get a guy called Andrew May. And Andrew's worked with Parramatta Eels the last 2 years as their mental skills coach. I've known Andrew for a little while through some mutual friends. He came through Cricket Australia. And that's a sport that you can learn a lot from, because if you're a batsman and you get out for a duck, it's a long old day for you. But even when you make 200, if you see Steve Smith walk off the field after he makes 200, he's still disappointed because he's been bowled or he's hit a shot that, you know, has been caught at, you know, square leg or in the slips or whatever. They're still disappointed. So he comes from, you know, from a really unique perspective. He comes from cricket. He's worked with guys. He's working with like Tim Zhu and some of those guys in the boxing industry now, works in corporate. He's worked with Parramatta. So he brings a great deal of experience to our group. And how we handle mistakes is potentially the difference between you know, winning some games and losing some games. Because if you don't get to your next job, if you're still dwelling on something that you've done wrong, then you're not actually helping the team. So he's got some techniques that we're starting to, or we will start to integrate into the group. And that's all part of that integrated approach. I spoke about it before, Jimmy. I think the mental skills is something that is where teams can get a competitive advantage. I think most teams physically have got it nailed. We know what the demands of the game look like from a physical point of view because you get your GPS. You know ball and play is around about 58 minutes on average. You know how many metres per minute. You know the accelerations per minute. You know the high-speed running, all that. So we can prepare, all 17 teams can prepare as good as they can there. Tactical, technical. Rugby league's a pretty simple game, so there's not a lot of change. You know, if you were coming across from a different country and didn't know anything about league and you watch, you know, the shapes that most teams throw, they're pretty similar, aren't they? Well, there's a couple of areas where you can potentially get a competitive advantage. And one is that togetherness and belonging. I think that's one space that we can really invest time in. The other one is the mental skills, mate. And I think that's the area that has been only really slightly in the last probably 4 or 5 years, you know, starting to really dive into that space. And things like breathing and so on, just all that type of thing, mate, is something that I think is really important. So Andrew is going to be a big part of that. And it's an essential part of our group. It's not an add-on. It's not something we'll just do once or twice. It is part of our program. You know, come January, it is a dedicated part of our program that is as important as doing our gym or as important as our field session. And that's the way I need to deliver that message to the group. Yeah,
I like the way you think, because in a salary cap sport, it's all about trying to get a slight edge.
Yeah. And
I think that the ability to remain focused, and sometimes I watch games, it's just a lapse of concentration. And you say, I think there's a saying that it takes 80 minutes to win a game of rugby league, but only one moment to lose it. And that's what it can be sometimes. It's just that, you see them that they weren't focused. They weren't focused on what was important, and those lapses in concentration can kill off any idea of a result.
Well, we talk about like staying in the moment, and I think like no player, I can't think of a player that I've coached who's deliberately gone out on the field and wanted to play poorly. Every player that I've coached and who's gone out on the field wants to do well. And they've all got different motivations. And sometimes, they don't always get their preparation right, or, there's certain things where, why players perform below their level. But one of the things that impacts performance is not staying in the moment, like switching off for that second. So, whether it's a winger, being late with, working together with his centre or mirroring what his centre does, or, it's a halfback who sort of just doesn't, he's not on task for that set, and all of a sudden puts a kick out on the full. And so I think that's, like those types of techniques and those types of strategies is really important, mate, for us as a team going forward, but individually as well.
Well, if you look back 12 months ago to where Manly were, they were a top 4 side, and they had a shocking start to that season. How do you get them back in contention? And is that part of the conversation around, well, here's your evidence of what you're capable of? Yeah, there's been a few personnel changes, but only 12 months ago, this is who we were.
Yeah, you're right. It's about, the contrast of when you're at your best, this is what it looks like, and contrast that to when we're not so good as a group or we're not so good individually, this is what it looks like.
Can that be the motivation as well? To almost just go, lads, if you want to, let's not get bogged down with this, because look at what we can do from a footballing point of view. Like, if we harbour these feelings or we don't sort these issues out, we'll be doing more like 2022. But if you want to be like 2021 in that contender for the top 4, when we looked like we were together, we performed better. Like, there's our evidence to do it, but we've got to just park that.
Yeah, so you're right. Like evidence is a really good word to say, mate, because like even yesterday, for instance, we had our team meeting, and I'm very much an effort-based coach. I showed 3 really good examples of us doing something that doesn't require talent or skill, right? Because that's the difference. Like in this group, there's enough talent to win some games, but it'll be in and around the accountability of the non-talent or non-skill required areas. So that's, this is what it looks like. And then versus just one where we didn't do it. You know what I mean? So look at that there. There's 3 examples of us doing this effectively at training. It doesn't take talent, doesn't take skill. And there's one example there where we didn't. We made a choice not to do it. And look at the difference in those positive examples versus that one not so good example. And that's evidence. And I think there's enough evidence to suggest that when the team is focused together and in the moment, that we have the ability to win games of footy.
On looking at Manly again, and there's definitely a correlation between when Turbo plays and when he doesn't.
Yeah.
How do you keep him fit? And is it as simple as that? Because I imagine you as a coach would be preparing for him to have some, well, it'd be state of origin, right? If he's injury free, but then with that level of athlete, he might need a week or 2 off. So what are you planning to do to maximise his amount of time on the field in a Manly jersey? But then also, what's the backup plan for when he's off doing his origin or he needs a break?
Yeah. So to start with, like, he's an elite athlete. So just looking at his performance over the first month of pre-season, the numbers that he gets in the GPS are elite. And him and Ruben Garrick, those 2 guys in particular, are elite athletes in whatever team, when I compare them to whatever team I've been in. So he's prepared himself really well this pre-Christmas break. He's coming back from a shoulder, so he's been really strengthening that. He's back into full contact, so he's in a really good spot. As far as when he's away with Origin or if he doesn't play any games, there's a really good young kid coming through, KO Weeks, who We've been trying to get Brett Stewart to spend some time with and educate him on the intricacies of fullback. Kao's come through as a halfback, been playing fullback the last year or two, and getting Brett to sort of do some mentoring with him with regard, particularly around the defensive splits. That's the area of the game young fullbacks need to work on. So we're looking at him. Ruben Garrick's played there in the past as well, but I think there's something about young Kay who can fill in that role. So we're trying to educate one of our younger players to take on that responsibility if Tom doesn't play, for whatever reason. But he's an integral part of the team. Like, you invest so much into, developing the players over the pre-season, improving the players over the pre-season. But you also need an ounce of luck, don't you? Manly are a better side when Tom's playing, and last year he didn't play too much. The year before he played, got Dally M Player of the Year. So you need an ounce of luck with her, but we're trying to prepare as best as possible to be able to handle the rigours of the NRL season.
I guess it's good that you mentioned that youngster coming through, but because I think every club that goes well, they have some breakout stars, especially when they're coming from outside the top 8. If you make the 8, there's normally breakout stars within your group. You look at the Cowboys, for instance, Nanai, like a breakout star, and that I think needs to happen from Manly. So who are you looking to be that sort of breakout player or breakout couple of players?
Yeah, I think some guys that come to mind, like Tolu Kula, played last year, and I think he showed glimpses of what potential or what ability he has, but I think he can go and continue to improve and go to that next level. So he's someone I'm really looking forward to helping improve. I think the other guys are like Kelma Tuolangi's come from the West Tigers. Kelma played first grade all last year. It's his first full season in first grade. So again, I think he's got a lot of growth in him. And someone like Taniela Paseka, and you might think, well, that's not really breakout year because he's played the last few years. But I just think that he could potentially, and I say that potentially, be one of the best front rowers in the game. So although it's not a breakout year, I just think that his ceiling is, he's got a lot of potential left in him. So there's 3 guys that have already played first grade, but I just think we can continue to help them grow. Yeah,
I like Cole Earth. Saw him play for Tonga in the World Cup, and he's got the best ingredient, which is pace. Yeah, which is really which you can't and it's difficult to defend against. Yeah. Another guy that I think you spoke about, Paseka, and I agree. I like what I've seen from him, but a guy that's going to be, it looks like from what I've read from you, is going to have a bit of a positional switch and get first crack at 6. Josh Schuster. Yeah. How important is it that he nails that down? And some people you forget how old he is. Like, he's 21 or 22. He's a kid, he's a kid. And he plays with a lot of flair. Sometimes it's almost like he can look where I watch him and think he is allowed to look where he passes, but he's got such a great skill set.
Don't worry, Flano's been talking to him about that at training because Shane Flanagan's coaching our attack, and so you're right. He can look where he's passing.
Yeah, but I think that body size in the 6th position will really add to Manly's attack. Where if you imagine typically that halfback gets it out the back, and then they get squashed off the back row, that one-on-one, where he's got the strength to get past that. So especially the goal line attack of him getting one-on-one with those, if he can get to the half, beat the edge back row on the outside, I think you'll get a lot of joy from that. Does it excite you, the fact that he can come into the 6th position and perhaps reach his ceiling at, maybe not as a back row, but as a 5'8"?
Yeah, it does excite me. Rightly or wrongly, Josh has been touted as a player of potential or very good player from the age of about 14. I think the last time I was at Manly 6 or 7 years ago as an assistant, Josh was about 14, and the club signed him then, and he had an exceptional junior career, and he was a real leader in his junior teams. Had a real voice in the team. But you know what it's like, mate. When you come into senior footy, into the senior squad, you've got to earn your place, and you do that, and you build trust through what you do at training and what you do on the field. And last year he had a bit of an interrupted season. Certainly the year before he had probably a breakout season at NRL level. Last year he was, had some injuries, and he was a little bit more inconsistent with his form. I think if we can close the gap between Josh's best and worst, that's the first thing we've been talking to Josh about. But his skill level is outstanding. He's a really big body, as you said, and I don't think his weight. Like people talk about his weight. For me, that's irrelevant. It's how he carries himself around the park. Can he do his job, etc. He's worked really hard so far this pre-season, but it's about earning the jersey through consistent performance at training and consistent performances on the field. But he'll get first crack at the number 6, and I've got great confidence in what we can do with him, to try and improve his consistency, and that'll help him. That will help him, and Flanner will work hard with him in attack, and then Jimmy Dimmick and myself will work, really closely with him, trying to improve that defensive side of his game.
Yeah, because again, we went back to before. It's that fine line of, how much do you care versus not care. If he makes a mistake, is he gonna put the passing game away?
Yeah.
Like that's the offload. If it doesn't come off, then the team's under pressure. It's like how do you get that balance? How do you pick your moments? It's an exciting year for him, though.
Yeah, he's a really good kid, Jimmy. Like he's someone that's easy to talk to, easy to get to know. So he's got a great opportunity, and I'm really optimistic about what he can do. I'm not sure where he thinks he can get his game to, but certainly we've had the conversation around, like, he's got so much more to give.
Yeah, that's good. Just talking about you coming over, you left England Rugby Union. Was there a temptation to leave that role early and start at Manly a little bit earlier?
No, I think I've got a great relationship with Eddie Jones, the head coach there, and when Manly spoke to me about coming on board, they understood that I had a commitment to finish there with Eddie and the England team. In actual fact, I think it was a good thing, the group starting the first 2 weeks without me. I put some people in place there that I trust and who were able to get there, I suppose feet under the desk, so to speak. It allowed some sort of separation between last season and this season. And, I felt as though coming in at the end of week 2 of pre-season, there was a real opportunity for me to come in. Some of the, the standards and that type of stuff had been set, and I was able to have a real clear pair of eyes. Okay, well, where are we at after 2 weeks? I thought it was important I finished my commitment with England, and I thought it was actually a good thing that I was away for 2 weeks and let the guys get going without me.
When you were originally speaking with Manly, was it with a view to coming in as an assistant and working under Des, or was it always, I'm going to be the head coach there?
Well, Manly always knew that my intention was to go through to the World Cup with England with regards to any succession plan. When they first spoke to me, Jimmy, it was around a succession plan. So whether that was to come in as an assistant coach or whether that was to come in as a head coach once Des had finished, that's initially what the conversation started when they approached me. And obviously, with the change of head coach, then they spoke to me about coming in as head coach now rather than in a year or so. So that was sort of the initial conversation. Did you have a want to come back and coach in the NRL? Did you ever want to come back and coach as an assistant coach or as a head coach? Or where did I sit? And it started as simply as that. Yeah.
Yeah. You spoke about some of those assistants that you've got working with you, and no coach does work alone. And you spoke about the psychologist as well that you'll be bringing in. Shane Flanagan, like you say, is he's another premiership winning coach. Was that your decision to have him with you, or was that a club decision?
No, I had total responsibility on bringing in my staff, and so one of the things I wanted to do was fill in the gaps around me, if that made sense. So I know what I bring to a group, and one of the things I thought, first of all, we start with Jimmy Dimmick. Jimmy was a fantastic player, but he's been doing his trade as an assistant coach now for a long period of time. He's been at Roosters, the Sharks. I think he might have had you.
Yeah, he did. Yeah.
So you know what Jimmy brings to a group, right? He brings energy. He's great with relationships. He's a fantastic mentor to the young Pacifica boys in our group. Flano, he's won a premiership. He's worked in a couple of different roles in recent seasons. So he's been a head coach, obviously at the Sharks, but he's been an assistant at the Dragons. He's done some salary cap management at the Dragons. He's worked in the media the last 2 years. So he brings a vast array of experience as well. And I just think he's a really good sounding board for myself. But also we can have, robust conversations with regards to our thoughts and processes and so on. And but ultimately, as the head coach, I make the decision. So those two guys, I wanted to fill in some gaps around me. And then Stephen Hales has brought a lot of those young boys through from Westfields in the lower grades at Manly, under 20s, Blacktown reserve grade. And so he's the third coach there. And we've got a young guy from Queensland, Guy Williams, who's an ex-school teacher. Young coach, really good young coach. He's sort of working in that transition space, with those younger players who bounce between the grades. So we've got a really sort of, and I wanted to bring a teacher in there in that space with those younger players. So I feel like we've got a good mix of personalities, good mix of experiences, and and I think it's important to collaborate with your staff because, as you say, the days, in my opinion anyway, of the head coach making every decision solely, I think I've got an idea, I give that idea, how can you make the idea better, and then I'll make a decision on it. That's the way I sort of work.
Is part of him being there as well to challenge you?
Is that Flano?
Yeah.
Yeah, of course it is. That's when I worked as an assistant coach with Eddie, that's the thing. He told me, he said, Seibs, I want you to think like a head coach. Like you're an assistant coach, but you need to think like a head coach. When you think like a head coach, you need to have critical thinking. You need to think, okay, if we do that, what's the outcome there? Or if we miss this, what's
the next what's the unintended consequences of this action or this failed action?
And so I feel I brought that to Eddie. I feel like I thought like a head coach, and I was able to challenge Eddie, or I was able to bring ideas, and that's what I want from Flano. Being an ex-head coach and a successful ex-head coach, the very first conversation I had with him, I said, Flano, I said, mate, you need to come here and think like a head coach. And I mean, you need to challenge me. You need to challenge, with regards to ideas, etc. And we need to have debates. But ultimately, it's my decision, and then we need to commit. And that's the whole coaching stuff. That's not just with Flano, but I specifically said to Flano, you need to think like a head coach because I need you thinking critically, and that's what he's brought in the first period of time.
Because I guess some may look at it as, well, he's just looking for the next head coach's job. Like he's been very vocal about wanting to be a head coach. Do you just view that simply as, well, if Manly do well, he'll be a head coach somewhere else?
Yeah.
But if they don't, he likely won't be.
Well, I just think if we do well as a group, and I've got confidence that we can improve the group, if we can do well as a group, right? And if Flano's got ambition to be a head coach, or even if Jimmy's got ambition to be a head coach, Jimmy Dimmick, then that's great. I see that as part of my role. Now, Flano's already been a head coach, but if he gets another opportunity off the back of doing a really good job with Manly, I think that's the way it should be. But he knows, and look, Flano's an experienced coach. He's been around, so he gets that. He's an assistant coach in this organisation. He's got ambition or aspirations to be a head coach, and if he does a good job here, then that potentially will help him. It doesn't interfere with what we do day to day. That's like a longer term goal, but you want people to be aspirational in your organisation, in my opinion, anyway.
Yeah, you should. You should want people to be aspiring to better themselves and have those aspirations. I agree. I think it's a good thing. At just looking at it, again, you sort of try and forecast negative headlines or what it may be, and I guess that's something that it sounds like you've sort of prepared yourself for, and that's your position.
Yeah.
I think that's a good thing. And like you say, you've got experience that yourself of you're a head coach. You changed codes, but ultimately you were in a not too dissimilar boat.
Yeah, definitely, mate. And so I know what I need from my assistant coaches. And if I'm not getting it, then I'm going to challenge the assistant coaches to give me what we need. So you don't want just people there who sit there at the table and agree with you all the time, because you're not going to get better as a group.
It's just a dictatorship, isn't it? It's just it doesn't work.
So like I said, as an example for the listeners, I've got idea. I might have an idea about something. I'll give that idea to the group, make it better. How are you going to make this better? Right, come back and tell me. Yeah, come back and present. If there's something I think that we can add to make the idea better, great, we'll run with that. If I don't think that it adds to the idea, guys, we're going to stay with what I had. But it's that collaborative process that I want to make the staff feel like it's not just my team as a head coach, it's our team, as the staff, and it's our team as a playing group. And it takes time to get there, of course, but that's the type of environment that I saw with Eddie. I felt as though I was able to create that at South Sydney. So I've seen it done well, I've seen it done not so well, but that's what I want from our staff.
You spoke about Eddie and your role with England Rugby Union. Why did you switch codes?
Well, it's an interesting one, mate. I sort of had a relationship with Eddie for about 5 years. He's a massive NRL fan, and South City in particular. Like he tells me stories about the days when the match of the day used to be at the sports ground or the SCG. He'd go with his dad, watch the Dragons play, the Bunnies there. Saturday afternoon as a kid, and he comes through playing league. And it wasn't he got into rugby sort of in high school, but he's been a massive supporter of rugby league. So we started doing some shared learning. Then when I finished up with the Broncos, he was the first person to offer me a role. About 2 weeks after that, he said, "Look, mate, I'd love for you to do some consulting for me, some special projects," he called it. And so externally, for probably the best part of 8 months before I went full time with him, I was doing some consulting for Eddie. So I was looking at rugby with a rugby league lens. He said, "Okay, just imagine you're coaching rugby league against Ireland, for instance. How would you break them down? How would you defend their shapes and so on?" So it just started like that. And then at the same time, I was doing 2 days a week with Newcastle as a coach mentor. So Adam O'Brien, he's a good friend of mine from Melbourne, Storm days. I was helping the assistant coaches and being a bit of a sounding board for Adam, and I'd just do it 2 days a week. And so it was a really good I kept my, sort of love for rugby league through that. I was doing some stuff in Rugby Union. I was doing some corporate stuff for Kestrel Coal. I was doing some leadership mentoring for them. So I was doing bits and pieces everywhere, a little bit for the NRL as well. And then Eddie said to me, he said, "Mate, we'd love for you to come full time. Senior assistant coach looking after our defence." So I had a decision to make, and I just thought, for me at the time, it's probably the best thing to just move away from rugby league for a little period of time, and probably move away from Australia for a little period of time, and put myself, like you talk about, out of your comfort zone. Like I'm on the plane flying over there, Jimmy, like the first time I went there. I'm an Aussie, so I'm not English, I'm an Aussie, going into an English environment, coming from rugby league, going into a different sport. So I had to either think, okay, well, like, they talk about imposter syndrome. I had to go, right, I'm just going to dive all the way in. And the first thing I did, mate, was talk about my challenges or my failures as a coach before I even looked at what I'd done as a coach. And I saw the eyes, just like really focus in on me in the room, because they saw that you're human straight away. That you're a bloke has had some challenges in their profession. So I didn't talk anything about the good experience as a coach. I went straight to, look, this is my background. This is my last role. Didn't go great. This is A, B, C, Y. And, you just saw the group really. From that point, I was just accepted straight away. And I loved every bit of my 16 months. It was so good. Coaching international rugby, 82,000 at Twickenham. We toured Australia. We won a series against the Wallabies. We drew with New Zealand recently. We beat the Springboks. All these great experiences. And Eddie's a very demanding coach. It's a high performance environment at the very, very elite level. So it was a great experience. So enjoyed my time there. But it was time to come home. My family's here in Australia, and that, I love representing the area. Like I've lived in the area there, or had a place in the area there since 2015, on the northern beaches. So actually, to get the opportunity to represent the area that I live in, I do feel that there's a real deep responsibility to that area, because I'm part of the community there.
Yeah, mate. When you spoke there about the teaching defence to rugby union players, like what is it that they like about league coaches coming into to teach defence? Because I'm thinking of union, it's there's not league coaches defend primarily to lock the ball up, right? But you don't really have that in rugby union. The offload isn't in such high demand or can break a game open. It happens, but not as much. And then even I'm just thinking about some of the league defensive shapes where you'd have a block of your left, middle, right. You might have a 5-man, your fullback comes into the line. But with rugby union, sometimes the biggest player on the park ends up on the wing. So how does that all work?
It's a really chaotic game, and that's one of the things that is challenging about the game, because you don't have a left edge, you don't have a right edge, but the principles are very similar, Jimmy. The unstructured part of the game, or the unstructured defence, is so similar. It's not funny. So protecting your inside shoulder, that's the same principle. Filling the space when the ball goes past you, that's the same principle. So keep on moving. So when the ball goes past you, you don't want big wide spaces, because if they drop back underneath, you get beaten. Putting inside pressure the ball player. So if you put inside pressure on the 10, you make him play a little bit earlier. Your edges don't have to make decisions. So that's the same. Working together on an edge. So sometimes you're right. There's a big man out there with maybe a centre and a winger as your last 3 defenders. But working together on an edge, that's the same as our 3 in, our 2 in, and our wingers in rugby league. So the principles in the unstructured is so similar. Where it is a little bit different is at the breakdown, obviously, or the ruck, because you've got to release once the player goes on the floor. So, but again, the principles of having dual contact. So 2-man tackles. The more 2-man tackles you have, the slower the ball, slower the ruck speed, and things like slow death, squeezing on the ball, taking your time all the way to the floor. That's all similar. So there's so many similarities there. That's why I think a lot of league coaches, particularly in Europe, it's not as common in Australia for league coaches to go across, but in Europe, Andy Farrell's the head coach of Ireland, Sean Edwards is the defence coach of France, Kevin Sinfield is the defence coach of Leicester, who won the premiership last year. Mike Forshaw, the old Bradford player, is defence coach at Sale. Just about every club you go to there, Brad Davis, you might not play against him, but I played against Brad in the Super League. He's a defence coach at London Irish, who the head coach is Les Kiss, who used to play for the Kangaroos in Queensland in the Origin. So everywhere you go over there's a connection to league, particularly in and around defence. So that was really good, to chat to guys like Forsh and so on and talk about defence. So yeah, there's a lot of similarities, but where it's different is the set piece. And where it's different is every ruck is a contest, so you can go and flood the ruck and try and get the ball back. But yeah, no, it's a fantastic game. But rugby league's a fantastic game, and rugby league is the game that I grew up loving. So that was I suppose the opportunity I saw coming back.
So they bring a lot of league people in. You've been in part of that environment and come back. is there anything you're going to take from rugby union and maybe try and implement into Manly's game plan?
Yeah, well, there were certainly some things in and around contestable kicks that I really liked. I think because everything's a contest in rugby, contestable kicks is another contest. So I think there's some things, and we probably already do it in some ways, like how you try and isolate a winger, with those cross field kicks. I think, looking at that, the short dropout, the short kickoffs, that's come into rugby league now, hasn't it? They do that often in rugby union. So there's already bits and pieces that I thought, that could potentially be a tactic in some moments of some games, etc. But also I like the way that Eddie set up his staff, and we I've got in some ways a bit of a model of that with Manly. Like we have our as assistant coach, you have your core principle. For instance, like Flano's attack, but then he's got a positional group of the halves, fullback and edge back rowers as his little positional group that he works on their craft with and gives feedback to. And we've got an outside backs coach there at Manly as well. So you have your moments of the game, like attack, defence, but then you've got some positional coaches as well. So I like that. How specific they were with some of their coaching. So, I've sort of brought a semblance of that back to Manly.
Mate, can you explain to some of the viewers and listeners just how big rugby union is back home? And I know that the NRL, it's a multi-billion-dollar industry now, but you look at, can you compare where England Rugby Union would train and where, say, South Brisbane or Manly train?
Yeah.
And all the luxuries that come with the RFU.
It's incredible. I got to say, I didn't realise how big rugby was over in Europe. I had a bit of an inkling because I spent time in England, as a player and when I first started coaching. But every game we played at Twickenham, we had 82,000. So it's like an Origin game every single test match. That's probably the closest way I can describe it, for people. Yeah, 82,000 every test match at Twickenham. Even when we played Tonga, there was 82,000 people there. And
all the build-up that comes with it as well.
The build-up, like you come into the ground, they pull the bus up and you walk and there's just thousands of people and the players walk first and the coaching staff walk in behind. And it's just like, thousands and thousands of people there. It's incredible. But then we went and played in Paris, mate. And I brought my wife over for this game. There was 83,000 in Paris. I never heard noise like it, mate. Just, the crazy French supporters were going berserk because they were going for a Grand Slam in the Six Nations. Went to Edinburgh, pulled up there. There's 65,000 at that game. Getting abused, by supporters, Scottish supporters as we were walking into the ground. It was an event every week. So it was like Origin every single week, every test. And I did 15 tests with England. It was an Origin-like experience every build-up. Where they train, they've got a purpose-built training performance centre at a resort called Penny Hill Park, which is about 35 minutes from Twickenham. It's on the way to Ascot for those people who've been over to England. And, you're based there. And you don't want for anything. It's very professional setup. We had our own chef, our own security. Like it's elite level sport at the very, very highest level. And then Eddie with his attention to detail, it was a fantastic experience. Yeah, it was a fantastic experience.
In terms of money as well, there's no expense form to fill out. It's just that
very well
everything.
Resourced.
Very well resourced.
Yeah, very well resourced. Because it's elite level sport. It's a worldwide game. And the thing that I noticed is like the best, probably the top 8 or 9 teams, mate. I was fortunate enough to coach against all 10 top 10 ranked sides, and probably the top 7 teams can beat each other on any given day. So there's a real cluster of teams. So the first team that can break that cluster has a really good chance going into the World Cup. And it's a little bit like the NRL. Like there's probably the really top end teams at the moment, isn't there? There's probably 2 or 3 teams who are very, very, very good. But then probably from team 4 down to maybe team 11 is quite close. Yeah. So I always think about how can we as Manly, like how can we break that cluster of teams? Like what's our competitive advantage? What can we do at training, or what can we do with our preparation to try and break that cluster of teams. And that's what every club in that position would be trying to do.
Going on to just sticking with the rugby union, what was it like when you, as an Australian, you're over here beating the Aussies? Was that strange?
It was strange. I think what prepared me for it, we played the Wallabies at Twickenham the previous November. Now, that was a bit surreal because the national anthems come on, the Australian one comes on first, you know what I mean? And I'm in there with my white, they call them anthem jackets. So I was in the coach's box in front of the Royal box in my anthem jacket. And it's quite surreal because all those games, you see Prince William and Kate, Middleton, in behind you, and you see Boris Johnson was there one game, and they're directly behind us. So it's quite a surreal feeling in any case. But the Australian anthem come up, and it was a bit strange that first time. So by the time we came over here, because I'd already done it once, I just wanted to beat the Wallabies, I suppose, as a coach, that competitive nature. We went down in the first game, by 2 points. And then we had, the Brisbane test at Suncorp and the test at the SCG were really good games. England played well in both games. Defensively, we were really good. So I got a lot of, it was a lot of enjoyment, and have my family come and watch, and be part of that experience was really good. But it was a bit surreal, mate.
I bet it was strange. Eddie Jones was the head coach. He's not anymore.
Yeah.
Could he make it in the NRL?
Yeah, Eddie's an elite coach. Like, he could be an NRL head coach. I think Michael Cheika would be the other one too. That
he coaches. He
coached Lebanon,
and Argentina, like a day apart, which is
incredible. Really,
it is.
I think those two guys, they could be head coaches or they could be director of rugby or whatever term you want to use. But they would need good rugby league assistant coaches underneath them. But they, for instance, Eddie, he knows how to set up an elite program, and a high performing program.
Is that part of like that? You as the ultimate leader, you set the environment, and you help people be the best version of themselves, and you just need that little bit of fine-tuning league knowledge to get the team performing.
I reckon so, and that's why I said before, like, I've heard, people say, with Flano or Jimmy, or particularly Flano being an ex-head coach. Like, as a head coach, you oversee everything, right? So you need good people in the different components of your staff, your coaching staff and so on. And it's trying to get the best people. And I feel as though we've got, the right people in the right positions in our organisation to help me as the head coach. And that would be the challenge for Eddie or Michael Cheika being, head coach in the NRL. Just getting the right people in the right, in the right seats there. But they both would know how to set up a high-performing environment. And I'm not sure, how serious Eddie would be. Like, he always jokes about, he'd love to give it a crack. I'm not sure how serious it'd be because he's got, even though he's not England coach anymore, he's got he'd have so many opportunities in rugby. Like, he already works with Suntory in Japan, and I'm sure there's other teams who have gone straight for Eddie because he's been an elite coach for a long period of time.
Well, that's what I was going to ask you. You think he can, but do you think he will?
Don't know. I don't know. The rugby union is a worldwide game. That's the reality of it. Like, so you've got elite, high finance competitions in Japan, in France, the English Premiership. As you know, it's the salary cap there is double what the Super League is over in England. Then you've got the Celtic leagues. Eddie was going to be a coach of a super rugby franchise in South Africa before he went to the England job. There's been talk of America coming in for Eddie, because they've got a World Cup in 2 cycles. I'm sure he's got a whole host of opportunities. If he was serious about, wanting to be an NRL head coach, I'm sure that there would be an opportunity for him at some stage somewhere. But, who knows how serious he is.
Yeah, he'd probably have to pull it back a little bit in terms of resources and financing it. It'd have to be a real drive. It'd be the drive, wouldn't it? And
it would be,
I guess an opportunity to I don't know if anything like that's ever been done before on
I'm not sure.
on a coaching level.
I'm not sure. Like
we saw Brad Thorne transition as a player, and Sonny Bill, and there's Jason Robinson, Andy Farrell, a couple of others that have likely missed. But for a coach, I think Clive Woodward, he tried something at Southampton.
Yeah, he did. But it didn't go great.
It didn't go. From memory, it didn't go great. So that could be that legacy piece, that little bit of something to elevate his status even higher than what it already is.
He'd be up for the challenge, I would have thought, but it's just, as I said, there's so many opportunities. There would be so many opportunities for him around the world in rugby. He might want to continue to pursue those ones.
It's an interesting time ahead. It'd be not a bad position to be in. Not a bad position to be in at all. Mate, just turning the attention back to you a little bit. In that first stint, or the first 2 stints as a NRL head coach, the decision to leave Souths and go to Brisbane, do you regret that at all?
Yeah, I do, and I've spoken about this previously. Like, I do regret it. I made a business decision in the end, and ultimately it proved to be the wrong decision. But the way I looked at it, there was an opportunity to set up, my family, not just my family, but my wider family for life through the deal that was offered to me. It was a 5-year deal with a 6-year in my favour, very lucrative. I said no a couple of times, but another year kept getting added, and it sort of got to the point where I felt as though, okay, if I don't take this, it might, it's probably negligent in some ways from a business point of view. But it was the wrong decision. I had a great group of boys there at Souths. We improved considerably. We went from 12th to 3rd in a year. We were half a game. It was 4-4 versus Roosters in the prelim final, and they ultimately beat Storm pretty easily the following week. So we were in a real battle there. So, I regret it heaps. I do. I regret it, but also maybe I wouldn't be the coach I am today if I didn't go through that experience of so much media exposure going to Brisbane, the challenges that came with being the head coach, after a legend like Wayne at the Broncos, the criticism of the old boys, of me, coming to the club, the noise that was always there. In actual fact, Jimmy, I've said this previously, I actually thought making the finals with that Brisbane team in 2019 was actually a bigger, I don't know how to say this, but a more successful coaching story than the previous year with South Sydney, taking them to the prelim final. And the reason I say that is we debuted 11 guys that year. We had a heap of young kids, but I think it was the way we bowed out. We got beaten 58-0 in the final. It was just, it was horrible. It was so poor. I didn't see it coming. We beat that Parramatta side 17-16 2 weeks earlier. So do you lose your talent in 2 weeks? Do you lose your fitness in 2 weeks? Do you lose your, physical? Yeah, as I said, your contact ability in 2 weeks. You don't. So obviously something mentally, wasn't quite right there for whatever reason. But actually to make the finals from where we come from, having changed over in the pre-season after about 5 weeks of pre-season training, when you look at it now and then when you look where the Bronx have been since, it was actually a pretty decent year for that group, and we just didn't get it right the following year, though.
Yeah. I was going to say, what would you do differently at Brisbane? Yeah.
I still would have blooded all those young kids. I think some of I was heavily criticised for giving Tommy Dearden his debut. I was heavily criticised for Pat Carrigan making him captain at 20 years of age. But if you look at where they are now, we could see that, or I could see that. There, it was just probably a little bit. We had so many younger guys, probably all at the same time and so on. But they're a good group of guys. Probably what would I do different? There's some things around. I made a lot of changes. Probably didn't keep some of the DNA of the fabric of the club. So that would be one thing. Some of the senior players, for instance, maybe could have handled some of them a little bit differently and so on. But in a lot of ways, as I said before, looking back now, like it seems a little bit surreal. It seems a lifetime ago, even though it was only a couple of years ago. But I feel like I'm a better coach, or even a better person. I've got more perspective on things. I would never have gone and experienced what I've done over the last 16 months with Eddie and England Rugby, and it was tough at the time. And I can see why people criticise me too externally, and that's life. You get on with it. But I don't think there's anyone who's human who hasn't made a mistake, and I made some mistakes, and that's life sometimes.
And we will continue to make them as well.
Yeah.
We will continue to make them. And it's very difficult to have that conversation either with yourself or with someone that's going through a difficult moment or a difficult chapter or a difficult moment in time, that there are plenty of benefits from hardship.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking you're going to use those experiences, both positive and negative, to make you, like say, a better person and a better coach. So what are those experiences, and is it just as simple? Sorry, what are the benefits from it that you've had? Is it just as simple as like forget the noise? You know that this whatever will happen, and it will pass.
Yeah, and that's probably one of the big learnings, particularly the social media stuff. Like, got heavily defamed on social media out of a really shit situation, mate. Like, myself and Aaron Molan decided to do something about it. Probably got called a whinger for doing it, but I thought I had the capacity or potentially the profile of being an NRL head coach to do something about it. Like, Aaron and myself, we appeared at the Senate. You know what I mean? We were able to. We didn't get the legislation changed, but we were able to bring it to life a little bit through our stories. We spoke at the Senate, said why we feel as though there needs to be change. Aaron Molan was a trooper in that space. So that was just one positive, so just knowing that you can get through that really tough, turbulent time where, like, you're not just on the back page, you're actually on the front page, and it's not good, it's not great, but you can get through it. So, there's some learnings around that. There's some learnings that, the media, and you work in the media now, Jimmy, like, the media, everyone's got an opinion, and some people will like you as a bloke, some people won't, some people will like you as a coach, some people won't. Like, I've learned that I can't control that sort of stuff, so you just crack on with it. I feel as though I've shown that I can bring groups together. I've also shown that, if you make some mistakes or if you're a bit cloudy with some of your decision making, then it can really go badly for you. I think I know what to look out for a bit better now, mate. I think that's the big thing. I know, like, I get a bit of, gut feel.
The warning signs.
Yeah, gut feel. I'm a lot better with my critical thinking, like, having worked for Eddie, like, I think that's one thing I learned of him. I learned a lot of bellyache with regards to the effort areas of the game and the things that don't require talent and skill. So I recall, back on that. So I've got all these different experiences, good, bad, and different. So I just feel like I probably know myself a bit better too, Jimmy. I think as you get older and you just start to know who you are and what you stand for, and in some ways, I probably feel like I just know what works for me and potentially what doesn't, and but we'll see. We'll see how it all goes. But I'm really optimistic, mate, about our opportunity at Manly.
Yeah, you mentioned that people in the media have opinions, but there's also agendas sometimes.
Yeah.
How do you feel you'll deal with that?
Well, I've been through it, so. I mean, I don't have to. Yeah, I don't know. It's a hard one for me to comment on that one.
Yeah,
mate.
that's fair.
And it is what it is. Like, it is what it is. It's probably the not so great thing about our game. Like, there's so many good things about our game, isn't there? Agendas, not so great, but again, mate, I can't control any of that. All I control is what I do at the club and whatever external noise there is, but I've been through it before. It's not as though I'm a rookie, like a rookie coach going into my first year, and I've only had positive press about me. Like, I've had like a lot of negative stuff said about me in the press. I've been through it. I've got through it. You know, and yeah, I'm just trying to have good perspective on things, and yeah, I just got to do what I know or I feel as though is best, and then the other stuff I can't control, mate.
Yeah, and just with that, the opinions, the agendas, the gossip, the pressure, was there a temptation to just leave it all behind?
For a really little bit, maybe. I reckon that's one of the things why I went to England, because even I was a 2-day consultant in Newcastle, and somehow I was getting brought up in recruitment, strategy and all that sort of stuff. But I really enjoyed doing that role. And then when they went into the bubble, I went up there, and I was actually back on the park doing some coaching, which I loved. It was awesome, because I wanted to help my mate Adam. And but I just think the opportunity to go to a different sport, as I said before, to work for somebody like Eddie, who is a high performance coach, very demanding, high expectations. I just think it was great for me. I loved it, but ultimately, rightly or wrongly, I just thought there was a bit of unfinished business back in the NRL as a head coach, and that's probably what you said before about the challenge for Eddie or whatever. Like, would he go to NRL? And ultimately, if you got the bug for coaching, you want a challenge, and I feel like this is a good challenge. There's there's been challenges at Manly the last period of time, but what a challenge! I don't know what the expectations are in and around Manly, but what a challenge it is. It's fantastic. I see so much potential in the group. There's some good people in the group, some good people in the club. And I just thought, it's time to come home. Yeah.
Is that a conversation you have with the family? I've been bit by the bug, and strap yourselves in. We're going again.
Yeah, definitely, because you know what it's like. Even as as a player, you move clubs, you move countries. Haven't you?
Yeah.
So all about it, mate. So they're along for the ride, because Dad's not as happy if you have a loss, is he? For the next 2 days.
No.
So it impacts on them. It impacts on them. But one of the things after Brisbane, I wanted to get the family settled. So where do you want to settle? And the area that we live in is that's where they've spent most of their childhood, so they feel like it's home. And so all my work has been built around having them settled, and then the coaching opportunities have to be built around the decision for a family, not just as a coach. But I've got the coaching bug, but we'll see. I've signed for 3 years. I can't wait to get going and playing some games, and we'll see what happens next.
Yeah, mate. I want to know this. I've heard you say critical thinking. How do you work on that? Do you read many books on it?
Yeah, I do. I do. I've got more into, as I've become a little bit more time poor, I've got into podcasts.
I know a great one called The Buy Round.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
I listened to the one you did. Is it Head Noise?
Yeah.
I listened to that whilst I was away. But I find that I find podcasts I find I've got more time. Like you get an hour podcast.
Yeah,
so it's almost like you're at the gym, you put it on. So by the time you travel to and from the gym and you do your workout, you get an hour done. In between campaigns with England, I'd read a book, if that made sense.
Mm-hmm.
During campaigns, it's too busy, so I wouldn't go back to my room and read a book. I'd listen to podcasts of a morning time at the gym. And that's sort of what I've been doing with, in the first couple of weeks here with Manly. I put a podcast on and I go and train early, and or if I take the dog for a walk. And I find that's really, invigorating. You might get one idea from a podcast, think, that's a really good idea. And that helps your critical thinking, because you always want to be thinking, like coaching's like a piece of string, right? Like there's no end to it. Like you always can get better in some way. Like, and I don't just mean as a coach, but your team, So whether it's with your staff, your players, your leadership group, it just goes forever. So there's always something you can think about. Can we do that a bit better? Can we do that a bit better? What can we do different here? But you've got your own philosophy, so that shapes you. But I find podcasts be really good, mate. Yeah.
Have you ever read The Trolley Problem? Would You Kill a Fat Man?
No.
It's good for critical thinking.
Is it? Yeah, no, I haven't.
It's an interesting book about the decisions we make and the potential consequences and the different how the situation can can change with one little piece of information.
Yeah, right. No, that'd be interesting.
It's really interesting. Yeah. This year with Manly, what can we expect?
Yeah, well, it's a really difficult one because every team in the competition, you talk to any coach after 4 weeks of pre-season, going great, good vibe, training well.
Train the house down.
Yeah, train the house down. So I've been through all this before. As I said, it's about an integrated approach to our preparation. One thing I do know, if you have a good pre-season, individually and collectively, generally speaking, it transfers to what happens in games. So we're working really hard every day to try and close the gap between our best and our worst. And that's just about being consistent. If we can get a 7 out of 10 every day from the group, then we'll keep improving. As soon as we sort of have an 8 out of 10 and then a 5 out of 10, from one day to the next, well, that's when we've got some challenges as a group. But look, I just think we want to reinvigorate the love for Manly from our supporters. It's got a deep history that we want to represent as well as possible. We've done some cool stuff with the legacy side of things of the club. We're working really hard on building that and educating the players of who's come before us. Obviously, we've got an opportunity now, in the present to leave our mark, and that's the challenge for us. But every team in the competition would be thinking or saying similar things. So there's so much work to do, mate. But we've had a really positive start.
I think the playoffs, Manly
like Manly.
Is that where they belong?
I think that's where they belong. That's what I think. Looking externally last year, working in the media, become an expert when you work in the media, Jimmy. That's what I found. But looking last year, they belong in the playoffs. But there's a lot of hard work, and you need an ounce of luck, mate.
Yeah, you do.
You need an ounce of luck. You need an ounce of luck with decisions, with players. And as I said, we're chasing those top couple of teams. There's a real cluster of teams, and I feel as though Manly are one of those teams. So
Absolutely.
It's up to us. Yeah, it's up to us what we do to break that cluster.
Yeah. I think you've got some really good things happening for you. Really good things. Final question: why do you coach?
It's a great question. I became a teacher, first of all. I studied teaching when I was 17, and I was teaching in year 6 by the time when I finished my degree, I was teaching. And for me, teaching and coaching is the same. I don't differentiate between the two. Ultimately, I feel as though I'm a resource to the group. I certainly feel as though I'm a servant to the group, not the other way around. Not everyone would think that, and not everyone would agree with that. But I feel as though when you're a teacher, when you're a coach, you're there to be a resource, you're there to serve the group. And in my instance, it's that sort of servant leadership. Like, I'm the leader of the group, so I'm there to serve, but I need to make tough decisions and I need to think critically and all those certain things. But that's why I coach, help others. And as I said, I started it when I was 17. I was teaching year 6, playing reserve grade at Broncos when I was 21, and I taught when I finished playing footy overseas. And so I've been back to teaching a number of times, but I don't see the difference between teaching and coaching. You're there as a resource. I want to help others, mate. I want to help others achieve their potential, and that's ultimately why I've coached for as long as I have. I think it's 17 years now as a full-time coach.
Good answer. I like what you said about the teaching side of things as well, because a couple of people that have coached me along the way have got that teaching background. Yeah. Daniel Anderson and Shep, like, both can articulate a message, and you're like, wish someone else had explained this in your terms a long time ago. Yeah. I agree, mate. Well, thank you for coming onto the bar, mate. It's been I've really thoroughly enjoyed this conversation, mate. I've enjoyed the conversation. It's been great to pick your brain, and I wish you all the very best this year, mate. You deserve it.
Thanks, Jimmy. I appreciate having me on. Thanks,
Cheers.
Mate.